was really a campaign that we launched in May because we wanted to invite decision makers in Switzerland to shape up the discussion. And before starting that, I really gave a thought before hearing you as to what it means and why it's important to break the silos. I wrote a blog at the time that you're more than welcome to go back to and see the main points, because it was really about thinking, how would Switzerland be a harmonious ecosystem? What would it mean? It would definitely mean more collaboration and more transparency. That would be really a resilient system. And some of these messages were in my blog from the very start. First of all, that it was the best time to think about what it means breaking the silos and to design a roadmap around that. And second, that it needs a cross-functional approach. And these are messages that should be kept in mind as sort of compasses in your own businesses and endeavors. So as Frederick already mentioned, we did 6 roundtables. We began with the public sector and international organizations, and then we went into specific roles, inviting CFOs from various industries, chief operating officers, and then we went into 2 specific sectors, financial services and supply chain, and we had a much bigger roundtable that was more focused on digital innovation with the, I would say, distinct participation of Nicolas Buhr leading Digital Switzerland here. And as you see already, we're talking about an ecosystem approach and not a siloed approach to hearing what matters and how this conversation should be shaped. The first and most important, and I would say sort of 100% agreed on this, was that suddenly there was a buy-in for digital connectedness and for fewer silos across the board. This was a buy-in that everybody, it was like a happy part. Everybody was really positive. This was one of the very positive aspects that happened out of this difficult and challenging situation. Everybody spoke about this buy-in, and it's all about people buying in. There was a compression in the buy-in time. And this is all sort of a big internal takeaway, internal within companies and within ecosystems. The other striking result was that execution was really fast, really, really fast. And that means that in those challenging conditions, execution was equal to business continuity. So there was no sort of, taking your time, meeting deadlines and so on. It was happening organically and naturally. So I would say that this was one of the most positive outcomes, and it was confessed not only by the CFOs and the COOs, but across industries, retail, brick and mortar, Swiss local businesses, banks, they all agreed on this part, and they shared with us examples of agility within their business that were all related to this compression of buying time and execution. Our guests, of course, since the theme was about breaking the silos, we spoke about the different silos, and most of them identified managerial silos within their businesses and within their entities, and also technological silos. Those were, again, 100% across the board, everybody had identified these two kinds of silos. There was some, not many, that spoke about ecosystem silos, meaning outside their organization, whether it's across supply chains or across industries that are seemingly loosely interrelated, but in these conditions, suddenly there were interdependencies that before were not so important. What became clear during this crisis was because of these silos, people realized in their function that there was locked up value that needed to be unlocked. And simply because especially in large organizations, there were many challenges of this nature of managerial and technological difficulties to overcome. But most importantly, these silos became very clear. Everybody became aware of them, whereas before they were ignored. And because we had this pause of business as usual, they became clear as if somebody had zoomed in with a lens and could see them and could not ignore them anymore. When we started the discussion with our guests about the silos, several of the guests pointed out that silos are natural in all organizations, in all communities, whether we're talking about nonprofit organizations, public organizations, or businesses. Silos are natural. So one of the main takeaways was that, you know, even if you get rid of all silos, there'll be some others that will pop up, new ones. So if you get rid of one, then maybe it will get replaced by another new one. So what to do? What needs to be done is to identify the dysfunctional silos. So for example, in technological silos that are easier to understand and easier to identify in an organization, one could make a list of the existing silos and have that way an order and an hierarchy and choose the ones that they want to first get rid of. In managerial silos, it might be more difficult, but again, there it's important to identify the dysfunctional ones and at least pick the top ones and get rid of them. As one of our participants said very nicely, you have to choose your evils. So you have to choose which ones you get rid of and which ones you keep. And also, it's clear from our discussions that the technological and the managerial silos are not unrelated. They're actually interdependent. So when you try to get rid of one, you effectively are getting rid of another one. And this brings me to the data discussion that is, of course, implicated in many silos. And it's not data's fault. Of course, it's us humans' fault. So let's look at data. I call her the queen because she's always been the queen, but really now everybody's aware that data is really core in an ecosystem. Again, if you think of Switzerland, if you think of a canton, of a public entity, an international organization, the private businesses around, data is what is connecting them or not connecting them. So our guests reiterated, I can't say how many times, that there is still a lot to be done in terms of cleaning up data within their businesses and their ecosystems. This is a major stumbling block towards integration. And I would say that this is a main and common theme across industries and very much related to tech silos. Of course, again, it's humans that make these decisions or don't. So the next step would really be to unlock value by gaining real-time insights from the cleanup and the integration of the data, because that is really what the aim is. I must say that I have goosebumps remembering one of our guests talking about how they closed their books remotely. What does that mean for data, right? And some other decision makers talking about the challenge, or the need rather, to have just a few KPIs, 3, let's say, maximum 5, to make a decision, rather than having dozens of KPIs and not knowing fast enough which ones are critical to their business. These are all data issues and related to technological and managerial silos, which to me highlights the fact that the cloud, and I use the cloud as an umbrella term, is not going to automatically solve these issues and break these silos unless it is designed from the start to do so. So data, architecture of data, the managerial silos, all these are very core, I would say, very centric to building resilience. Another major highlight from our discussion was the changing role of CFOs and COOs. Actually, in many organizations in Switzerland, they don't even have COOs, and if they do, they're more figurative titles. CFOs were the ones that during this challenging period clearly got automatically, again, a much broader role and were core in the recovery, in the business decision at all levels. Whether it was reducing the workforce, but keeping the system critical staff, or whether it was finding new suppliers, or changing the manufacturing processes, or changing even the business model. In all of those decisions, the CFO was what I would call the ringmaster. And think of it, we lived and we still live in situations where any business decision has major ripple effects. PwC CFO Pulse presents a lot of evidence, concrete evidence with statistics globally about this issue of the changing role of the CFO. And we heard from you also in Switzerland that the CFO did play a very different role than it used to play prior to this crisis. So some of the reflections that were discussed and I heard from you either explicitly or implicitly, was about the fact that there's a necessity to build resilience going forward. There's no doubt about that. The issue is that this is the time to plan for resilience for the next decade. And why do I say that? I don't say it because, we can predict what's going to happen. We cannot predict what's going to happen. But what we have learned from this experience is that we can prepare for the unexpected. And that's what we need to do. So right now, we need to be continuously checking whether we are using our existing technologies to the maximum. Are we squeezing all the juice out of what we have already in terms of technologies? And this, of course, does not refer only to the software or the hardware. It's all about the human factor, because as we all know, a technology is good enough as the way we use it. So that is one item that became clear from our discussions. We also spoke about the need to have an in-house burning platform. Some of our guests actually mentioned that they built an in-house burning platform during the lockdown. We'll discuss afterwards whether it's been used, whether others have built, what is going on this front, and whether we have relaxed or not. The other insights that we gained by discussing about silos was about revisiting the boundaries of our businesses. A lot of businesses were forced to change their partners, rethink their supply chain, their vendor chain, who they partner with. They were forced to even rethink what the boundaries of their industry is. What industry they're in a way. I'll give you an example. Are you in the transportation industry, or are you a technology company? Are you in the logistics business, or are you in the commerce business? Are you selling products, or are you servicing clients? What are you? All these boundaries in terms of the nature of your business need to be rethought, and many companies were forced to rethink during the lockdown. And this, of course, helps in building resilience and building a more agile and broader business. For me, at a higher level, this is all about checking what your vision is as a business, but also down to earth, what is your peripheral vision? What can you see? Who you are connected with, and how you are connected. And this brings me to where I started, the ecosystem approach. From all our discussions, it became clear that a strong Switzerland, a strong Swiss economy can be built and be resilient through more open collaborations, new collaborations, whether they are with shared infrastructure, less data silos, less human silos, more bridges between the private and the public sector, always doing these links with more open governance than before, and thinking and having the vision of building a more agile ecosystem. So I'd like to close with this, beginning from this theme of breaking the silos and you all shaping the discussion, we are arriving to a vision where we want to build an ecosystem that's much more collaborative and with open governance, and is all about having soft boundaries, broader boundaries than the current ones. And this is where we, the people, can become aware of this and start building with this vision.